Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got an incredible guest. This is not only one of my favorite people in town. He's fun, he's energetic, he's upbeat. He's just a great guy all around. He's also got one of the most interesting life stories you'll ever meet, including service to our country as a guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. That's an incredibly prestigious position to have in the military. And of course, it comes with a great glimpse of the history of our country and some of the most important things that America has to offer. And so I can't wait to dig into that, into his profession, into his personal life, just learn all about our great guest today. And that's Benton Thames. So with no further ado, I bring to you Benton Thames of State Farm Insurance. Benton, thank you for coming on the show. It's so great to have you.
It's my pleasure, Parker. I'm excited to be here. You know, I've been watching your podcasts. I try to make it every week, and I've been loving it. And I've been fascinated with how much I've learned, you know, by the people of Ponchatoula through this. So I'm excited to be here. Well,
thanks for saying that. And as you know, we've talked about this before. I've been really eager to interview you because I know from, you know, the time we've shared as friends, as members of the Rotary, you know, whatever, that you have got a great story to tell, not just personally, but professionally. So why don't we just begin with you telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So originally I'm from Denham Springs, actually. So yes, I know I'm a Ponchatoula transplant, Bill. You know,
everybody transplanted here at one point or not. You know, my family did it in the 1890s, but you were just a little more recent. We're not holding a grudge about it.
Yeah. You know, and it's kind of funny. I've always heard the stories after I had been here for about a year or two. I've heard the stories about, you know, being a Ponchatoula outsider, so to speak. But, you know, listen, it
takes a while to get street cred around here, no doubt.
It does. But look, I've been met with nothing but love from the residents of Ponchatoula and the fellow business owners around Ponchatoula. So it's been incredible. But yeah, originally from Denham Springs, you know, I went through the Denham Springs school system my whole life, all the way until I was a junior in high school. And I was just ready for a change up. I wanted to play baseball at a smaller school, wanted something kind of different. And so I had grown up, my parents bought a place down the Tickfall River when I was about 10 years old. And so I'd really fallen in love with the Springfield, Ponchatoula area. And so my junior year of high school, I actually transferred out to Springfield. And that's where I learned a little bit more about this community in Springfield as well. And so I ended up graduating from Springfield High School, which was a great
cool.
I loved it. Going from a big 5A school to a 2A school was actually a really good thing for me. I really enjoyed it a lot. And so.
Well, you mentioned baseball, and as you know, Ponchatoula is a baseball town. I mean, here in my office, I've got a bunch of old photos of the Ponchatoula Athletics, or our former semi-pro team. Tell us a little bit about your baseball career. What position did you play? You know, what did you love about baseball?
Yeah, mainly infield, shortstop, second base. And I loved it from the time I was 3-4 years old. From the time I could really walk, I was picking up a baseball bat. And really, it kind of defined a lot of my childhood and my older brother's childhood as well. Family vacations revolved around going to play baseball tournaments. You know, vacation, you're going to Pensacola, and we're playing Little League baseball tournaments over in Pensacola. And so most of our trips, our family trips, revolved around baseball. We made a trip to Virginia, and actually, ironically, that's the first time when I was 10 years old, we came up to Virginia and played a baseball tournament up there. And afterwards, we made the short drive to D.C., and that's whenever I got to see the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, Arlington Cemetery, for the first time in my life.
Oh, wow. So you got to see that as a kid. Wow, that must have been powerful.
Absolutely. And that memory has always stuck out to me. And I'll go back to that a little bit when we start talking about the tomb. But, you know, the memory of going when I was 10 years old really had always stuck out to me and kind of defined why I went that direction in my military career as well.
Well, I love how you mentioned life revolving around baseball. And today's no exception. The reason our show is an hour early today, and the reason we're going to break a little bit early, is because I got to get out to Pard to watch T-ball games. My little boy Luke's playing. So thank you all for tuning in early. I see that our friend Mark Verbois has tuned in, folks. So you can see here Mark's commented about how he's so eager and excited to hear Benton's story, and glad to have Benton as part of the community. And he says, Benton, it's okay to be a bulldog. You know, they're cool neighbors. Now, if you were a Hammond High Tornado, might be a little different. You know, we might come at you with a different vibe. But, well, that's cool. So you moved to Springfield to play ball. you get to know not just that community, but this. I mean, Springfield's so small. I'm sure you're kind of coming into Ponchatoula from time to time for the things that you need that we have that they don't have, and you just kind of get a lay of the land. Is that how that went down?
100%. You know, growing up in Denham Springs, I had never even heard of things like the Strawberry Festival, which is great
Right.
because it's such a big deal on this side of town.
Yeah.
But I had never even really heard of it before. And so, yeah, my senior year at Springfield, I got to go to my first Strawberry Festival and walk around. And I was kind of like, you know, it was really awesome to see. Very confused.
Tell us about that. What's it like as an outsider? What was your first impression of the festival as somebody who didn't grow up with it like I did?
Yeah, huge, overwhelming, to be honest with you. I'm not always fond of big crowds. Strawberry Festival is a big exception to that. You know, it's a special feeling. There's a special, aura in the air, if you will, when Strawberry Festival happens here. And
right,
I've been so bummed that we haven't had it the last couple of years because my office is here on North 6th Street, and you know, it turns
right in the heart of the festival grounds. Yeah,
right. And you know, the vibe leading up to it, the 2-3 days prior to Strawberry Festival, there's just this buzz around town. And
yeah, it's like a hurricane almost. There's an electricity in the air. You're right. It really is. And now you serve on the Strawberry Festival board. Is that right?
That's correct.
Tell us how that came to be and what the experience has been like for you to serve on that board.
You know, the people of the Strawberry Festival board are really just so special. Their passion behind it. I don't know that I've seen a group of people so passionate about an event in my lifetime. And so that to be a part of that is really special. Now, I'll tell you, I don't know if I'm going to keep getting invited back because since I've been to Strawberry Festival. So I'm so sure I'm going to be welcome back. But, you know, kidding aside, it really is unique, special to be a part of. We had a great time at Strawberry Day in the Park and just experiencing it. I had asked a couple of old timers that have been on the board for 30, 40 years. And just kind of what brings you to do this year in and year out.
Right.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of stress.
And they keep coming back. You're right. People that are on the board now were there 20, 30 years ago, for sure.
That's right. You know, Donald Lanier, who's going to be our chairman next year. So I'd ask these guys, like, what keeps bringing y'all back? And they said, look, when you work a festival weekend, you'll understand. And so just working the one-day Strawberry Day in the Park event, for me, I told my wife, I said, I get it now. 100%. I get why people are on this board for 20, 30 years. Because
and the guys you mentioned have not only been on the board that much, but they've served as chairperson several times over, you know, so.
Right.
Yeah.
He'll be chairman again for
That's interesting. Well, speaking of folks that have been around Ponchatoula for a long time, Mr. Paul Kluka chimes in that he's glad to meet you. Mr. Paul, thank you for watching. You are always one of my heroes. We were talking baseball. I remembered you were always at the park when I was growing up as a little league player. And speaking of youth sports and baseball, we've got Cody Nunn. This is one of my son's coaches. Cody's a great guy now. Benton, he says you're the man and he won't take anything from you for choosing Army over air. He says you make up for it by graduating from Springfield. Cody, thanks for tuning in, man. I can't wait to see you and the boys later today. Verbois is back chiming in again here and says, who knew Donald Lanier liked the Strawberry Festival? Yeah, Donald, who knows he liked that, cooking jambalaya. Well, so we're here with Benton Thames, State Farm Insurance Agent. We're going to get into all the professional stuff later. We're going to get into the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, but we're still talking about his childhood. Growing up in Denham Springs, moving to Springfield, playing baseball, hitting the Strawberry Festival for the next time. What was, who were some people that were influential in your life back then? Whether it was coaches or teachers or family or friends or whatever, who were folks that you came up with that you really appreciate all these years later?
Yeah, my biggest influence in my whole life is definitely my parents. My dad instilled a work value in me, both playing sports and ethics involving sports. And that has really driven me to become the person that I am because, he expected a lot out of me growing up, me and my older brother. And so we just always looked up to him and still do. He's the hardest working guy that I know. And both my parents have just been a tremendous influence on my life. And I'm super fortunate to have parents like I do. I thank God every day that I was born in the family that I am. We're a really tight knit family. And
right.
You'll never meet a harder working guy than my dad. And so that's been definitely the biggest influence in my life. Coming out this way, I didn't really get a chance to get to know a lot of people from the Springfield area. I was actually still going back and forth between Denham Springs. My parents still had their house there.
Gotcha.
But yeah, Jeremy Harper was actually the head coach, who actually
great guy.
Girls coach now, I believe, the softball
Right.
coach. And he's also Rotary, helps us with the Interact Club with Rotary.
Yeah.
Fantastic influence on me.
Super guy.
Yeah, really helped me out with baseball and going to a smaller school and what to expect and that transition. So Coach Harper definitely helped me out with that transition a lot.
Cool. Now, you mentioned your older brother a couple times in addition to your parents. What's the age gap between the two of you?
My brother is 2 years older than I am.
Oh, yeah. So that's the same as Bree and I. Now, if y'all were anything like us, you know, you're tight and you're fiercely loyal now, but coming up, I mean, we scrapped a lot. We threw hands quite often, drove my parents wild. Were the Tim's boys anything like that, or were y'all better mannered?
You know, we were pretty well mannered with each other growing up. You know, there was always, you know, being 2 years apart, like you said, you know that story and how that goes. And so there would
it's a couple of dogs fighting over the same bone sometimes, right? I mean, sometimes it's just
that's right. But you know, we have a lot of different type of personalities. I think had been the same personality, if we were both me, we would really have it wouldn't have been so well. But my brother's a lot more mild mannered than I am, and a heck of a lot smarter than I am.
Well, I'd love to have him on the show. See if he's as modest as you are, because you're not giving yourself credit. Tell me this: what about the next chapter in your life? You know, because you mentioned the kind of transition down this direction. Playing sports, going to Springfield. Where'd you go next, and what did you do?
So, you know, I had all these grand plans. I was really good in school. I scored really well in the ACT, made good grades, and I had these grandiose plans to go to LSU as a finance major. And I will tell you, you know, I tell kids this story all the time, people that get burnt out on school. I went my first semester at LSU, and I absolutely hated it. I was burned out on school. I was just over it. I had worked my whole life to good grades and this good background. And I got to LSU, and it just wasn't for me. I don't know if it was the size of the classrooms or what, because, you know, going back later in life to Southeastern, I absolutely loved going to Southeastern. And that's not a knock against going to LSU. I think at the time, I was just really overwhelmed. And so my first semester at LSU, I threw my hands up. I was just done with school. And that's what led me into deciding to serve my country and join the military.
And that story is not that uncommon. I mean, LSU is one of the largest universities in the world, right? I mean, it's tens of thousands of students, major city. And like you said, you're coming from a 2A school at Springfield, right?
Right.
And you had some Denham background, but let's face it, Denham is not Baton Rouge. It's not LSU. So that makes sense. So you decided to join the military. Tell us about that process. How did it go down? How did it go over with your parents? You know, tell us about the recruitment process, and let's get into, you know, basic training and the whole 9 yards.
For sure. You know, I was honestly petrified to tell my parents, which, looking back on it, you know, my dad would probably laugh about that, because it's, you know, as a parent, of course, you'd be proud of your children serving in the military, and scared as well, I'm quite sure.
Right. Of course.
But, you know, I was just petrified to tell my parents. I remember bringing them in the living room, and I had already went and met with an Army recruiter and brought him in the living room and sat him down and I was just tears running down my face, because I was so afraid, because I wanted to make my parents proud. And
at this point, had you signed on the dotted line? Were you committed, or was this just something you were considering?
No, I hadn't signed on the dotted line yet. And but I had met with the recruiter, and I had made my mind up already. Like, I was in the military. I was probably the easiest recruit that my recruiter ever had, because I walked in his office and I said, "Hey, I want to join the Army. I'm going to." ASVAB score was, you know, really good. I could do whatever I wanted in the military. I said, "I want to join the infantry, and that's all I want to do. I want to be a foot soldier." And so, you know, he didn't have to convince me to do anything. And
so you've done a lot of your homework. How did you come to that decision? Did you? I mean, you seem like a very well-researched guy. You're clearly a very bright guy. You know, that idea probably didn't come out of thin air. What inspired the infantry decision?
You know, I'm going to be honest with you, Parker. I am usually a pretty well thought out person. Sometimes I can be, you know, impulsive, but typically I am well thought out. That was definitely an impulse decision to go the infantry route. I didn't think it out at all. I don't know what okay. I didn't even really know how the military worked. So much so, Parker, that I actually sold the car that I owned because I didn't think you were allowed to own a vehicle while you're in the military.
Oh, wow.
That's all I knew about it. But
Uh-huh.
I had some family members, some distant family members. I had an aunt and a couple of other people that were a little bit distant to me that had served in the military. But I didn't really have any real close family in my circle that had served in the military. So it was definitely not like a legacy thing for me to join the military. And so I really just didn't wrap my head around what was going to happen, what to expect. I knew nothing except for what you see in movies pretty much.
Right. Well, let me take an opportunity here to share a comment by Miss Cynthia Gregoire. Miss Cynthia, hey, I hope you're doing well. One of the finest ladies in town from one of the best families. She says here, thank you for your service to our country and congratulations on being selected to guard the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, national heroes. And we know what a big deal that is. You're going to educate us more on that here in a bit. But thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice, for that bold, as you call it, impulsive decision. Tell us, when did it hit you, kind of the consequence of what this decision meant? Because what I'm hearing is, while you're normally a very prepared, methodical planner of sorts, this was a moment of impulse. This was a bit out of character for your normal, and so I'm sure you have that moment of reality, like, what the heck did I get into? And if I'm wrong, tell me, but if not, tell us about how that went down.
You were spot on. And it hit me probably about 2 weeks after I had gotten to Fort Benning, Georgia, where I'd gone to my basic training. And it's different because, like I said, I didn't really know much about the military. And so you see on the TV shows or the movies where you pull up on a bus in the Army and, immediately they got a drill sergeant that jumps up on there, starts yelling and screaming and cursing at you. And then
I'm thinking of Bill Murray in Stripes, or something like that.
That's what as well. And so when I shipped off training and we arrived by bus, we flew into Atlanta, and then they bussed us, a huge group of us into Benning. And I'll never forget, the drill sergeant got on the bus and he was just mild mannered. He said, "All right, gentlemen, this is what you're going to do. You're going to make a line this way. You're going to get up." No yelling, no screaming. And I was so confused. I didn't know what was happening. I said, "Man, this is bizarre to me." Well, it turns out that when you arrive to your duty station, to basic training, they're not going to shark attack you, so to speak, when you arrive. You got to go through all the processing and all that. Then when they ship you off, when your basic training actually starts, after you've gone through that processing, that's whenever on that bus.
That's when it hits the fan.
I was confused, and I had spent like 3 weeks at this facility waiting really to get shipped. The infantry yard, where the real training starts. And I would say 2 weeks of waiting around and starting to learn the Army processes is when it hit me like, whoa, I'm in, we're not in Louisiana anymore.
We're not in Kansas anymore, so to speak, Dorothy. That's funny. Well, tell us about that. What was it like? And at that point, then you get to basic, the other shoe drops, what was the training like? How'd you like military life?
I loved it. 100% basic training was tough. And this is going to sound so bad, but, in my day, I hear all these old guys speak whenever, former military guys say, well, in my day, we didn't do it this way. And it has continually evolves on how they interact with soldiers and how things are conducted. But it was tough, the physical aspect of it was tough. For me, the mental aspect of it was tougher. I'm a really close family guy. I love the South Louisiana community. I love our culture. And so right away, I missed that. So the mental aspect of it was always the toughest part for me. And
you're such an extrovert. You're such an effervescent, outgoing guy. I mean, you don't strike me as the natural, put your head down and stay quiet and stay in one place all day kind of dude. So I would imagine that was a bit of a challenge to follow that kind of rigid structure.
It was, because like you said, I am a social person. And so I like to talk. And so I like to talk to people and get to know people well. That doesn't bode so well for you. So
they're not looking for you to be chatty when you're a private or trying to get through the training. I'm thinking tomorrow, my godson, Colin Lee, who's in the Army National Guard, it's his birthday tomorrow. But, we all view the military, those of us like myself that never served, through folks that we know that did, and family members. And so I've got uncles and cousins and all that did it. But the guy I've seen up close and personal the most recently go through that is Colin. And like you, he was a heck of an athlete, had a lot going for him that made him a naturally gifted soldier. But at the same time, I mean, it's a rugged grind, right? And if you like to socialize and party and have fun and do all these things we like to do in South Louisiana, you are in for quite a change in lifestyle there. So I'm sure that was a challenge.
It was, and but I loved it. I really ate it up. I enjoyed the challenges that it presented, and I loved the leadership aspect of it. I was pretty fortunate. My drill sergeants made me what they call platoon guide, PG, which is you're basically private in charge of the other privates. And when I say in charge, just you're the one where they're going to come talk to if there's fights breaking out or anything like that. They'll bring it aside and say, hey, you need to control them lockers hitting each other. Right. Anytime there's a fight, hey, we hit a locker. So hey, you need to get the lockers under control. Or hey, you guys' beds have been messy for 2 days now. If you mess up again, this was going to happen. Then I would communicate that to the rest of the guys. And so that was a neat thing. I really enjoyed the leadership aspect right away.
Well, and clearly you thrived in that because of what you'd go on to do. When you got out of basic training, tell us about that. How did it take you in what direction, and how did you get into other echelons of leadership in the military? What was the next chapter in that story?
So, about week 9 of basic training, we were in formation, and they had a whole battalion basically of soldiers that were out there, hundreds of soldiers on this field that were lined up. And they were calling a few names out to come out of formation and go somewhere else. And basic training is one of those places you never want to hear your name. Hear your name, it's usually not good. And so they were screaming names. It wasn't a whole lot. It was less than 10. And then boom, here comes my name. So they call us out of formation. They bring us into a room. We have no idea what's going on. And they said, listen, as basic training is coming to an end, we've got an offer for you. And they said, there's a unit in Fort Myer, Virginia, south of D.C., called the Old Guard. And we are looking for soldiers. It's an all-volunteer unit. And we're looking for soldiers to go up there. Now, my contract was to go to airborne school and go to a normal infantry unit.
Gotcha.
I started immediately, even through my whole time through basic training, I was really second guessing jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. I was really nervous. It's probably the most scary thing I was to do. And guys joking, they call us legs. If you're not airborne qualified, you're a leg in the infantry. I had made up in my mind that I was perfectly good at being a leg. If I could, and stay a leg, I'm good with that. So they pitched us this idea of this volunteer unit at Fort Myer, and I really didn't know much about it. Didn't know what they did. They tried to explain what you do. Oh, well, they do funerals in Arlington National Cemetery. They can work at the White House and the Pentagon. They do different things. And then, boom, immediately my mind went back to when I was 10 years old and had gone to D.C. And I really loved D.C., Arlington Cemetery, that whole part. And so I really had a tough decision to make. And I consulted with my family, and my dad knew a guy who was stationed at the Pentagon, I believe, and he had called him and he said, man, you really need to take this opportunity. It's a really good opportunity. It's an elite unit.
Right.
You should definitely do it. And so I did. I volunteered to go to the Old Guard and get stationed at Fort Myer, Virginia. And that's kind of
and that's remarkable, but get that kind of opportunity so early in a career. That really speaks to how well you were doing. That's really impressive.
It is, Parker. And they go off of a few things, even down to like an ASVAB score. They go off of height. So you have to be 5'10" or taller to even get considered going to Old Guard.
So I would be SOL, man.
And I get the question a lot, what is up with the height requirement? Why does that? Most people think, well, so that all soldiers look the same height. But in reality, it's a tradition that dates back to older times when having a large army mattered. So the old 3rd Infantry Regiment is the first military personnel that foreign ministers, foreign prime ministers, foreign dignitaries and heads of state, we're the first soldiers that they see when they come. We're doing the escorts for them and all that kind of stuff. So in the olden days, it was important to give the appearance of a big army.
Yeah.
So when
You want a George Washington looking dude out there, not a John Adams type, right?
exactly.
John Adams can stay back with the legal work, but we need the big dogs up front. That makes sense. I got no problem with that. As a short guy, I can respect that rule.
Yeah. So that way, dignitaries come in and, man, the United States military is huge. We don't want to mess with those guys. So that's kind of where it came from. And then you got to score a certain physical fitness test score and all that kind of good stuff to get invited to this unit. And
Right.
I also kind of do a pre-check on you to make sure that you can pass having a secret security clearance as well, because you're going to be thrown on the White House front lawn, the Pentagon, all that good stuff. So you've got to be able to pass a full secret security clearance, just past your typical military clearances to even join the military. It's much more entailed clearance in order to get
Gotcha.
that. Got to kind of do a background on that initially as well. And so they invited me up. I volunteered.
So, you kind of need a 5-star prospect, right? I mean, you've kind of got to be a well-rounded, talented soldier across the board with no glaring deficiencies.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, the next thing you know, I'm up in D.C. Within a matter of weeks, I found myself standing at the front lawn of the White House, and a very surreal moment.
Wow. Tell us about that. What brought you up there that quick?
Yeah, so you go through a 2 to 3 week program. There's actually a really good documentary on Amazon right now that kind of walks you through the old guard and the steps. And you go through this regimental orientation program. I think it's 3 weeks right now. And you go through it, and you basically are relearning your military arms drills. So with a weapon, when you stand at attention, how you stand at attention, we do it way differently than the rest of the military. For example, in the Army, normal Army, your feet, you stand like this with your heels touching, but your feet are stead like this. When the old guard at attention, your feet are straight.
And what's the reason for that difference? Why?
Better.
Okay.
Yeah, and so standing like this is more practical, but standing with your feet straight looks better.
Gotcha.
And same thing in the regular Army, you hold your fist next to your side like a ball like this. And in the guard, we stand with our hands like this because, again, it looks better. It hurts. It's more uncomfortable.
Right.
But it looks better. And so,
right. That attention to detail seems a lot more precise and a different intent there. That's interesting.
It is.
Well, I got to say, Benton, you're talking about 2 trips to D.C. once as a kid, and I think a lot of folks can relate to that because so many schools visit D.C. when they're kids. You did it playing ball, and then back up there as a soldier with all these high-profile, impressive, first duties. It just can't help but remind me of being in D.C. at what I'm assuming is about the same age. I was up there for my junior year of college on an exchange program. And but with very little discipline in my life, right? I mean, it was the frat boy stage of life of I had a lot of fun, and I got to work in Congress, and that was a great honor, but there was zero discipline whatsoever. I mean, and if I wasn't getting dressed for work, it was T-shirts and beer and margaritas. So you really chose a different path. I admire that. You had to sacrifice a lot. You could have been at LSU drinking beer and eating jambalaya with all your buddies, and there you were up in D.C. serving the country, with your fist in a painful position. So thanks. That's cool. So tell us, the White House lawn, to the extent you can, tell us about some of your favorite memories. I mean, what did you love about serving in our nation's capital and so especially at the White House and places like that?
Yeah. So prior to going to the tomb, a couple of my favorite memories, I got really fortunate. I was in Echo Company, which is the company that does a little bit more than some of the other units. They primarily do funerals in Arlington National Cemetery, which I did participate as part of the firing party in some of those. And I can tell you, it is one of the most honorable things that you can be a part of to lay to rest, our nation's heroes. But it is also very emotionally taxing to do that day in and day out, especially with the firing party, because as you fire the weapons, you've got families that are crying over here, burying their loved ones. And when you fire the weapons, you can see the family jump, and it's heartbreaking to watch. But it's what they deserve. They deserve the 21 gun salute. And so that's,
of course.
So I had done a few of those, but Echo Company that I was part of, did more of the stuff at the White House, the Pentagon, so these cordons basically, which is when foreign dignitaries arrive and they're coming into the White House front lawn, we're standing there dressed in our blues uniform, standing at attention, welcoming them to the United States, basically. One of the most prominent ones that I got to be a part of was doing it for the Queen of England. And actually got to be a part of the team that not only welcomed her into D.C., but we actually got to follow her around throughout the city. So when she went to the World War II Memorial, for example, we got to go and escort her.
Oh, wow. That's so amazing. That's got to put a whole new angle on watching an episode of The Crown or something. I mean, you had a first row view to history there, man. That's amazing.
It was so really cool. And I make jokes all the time. You can smell the Queen coming from a long way away. I don't know if they douse her outfits in a certain type of perfume or something, but that's one thing that just always stood out in my mind is like she just had this smell about her from 20 yards away. It was really
wow. Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah, it was really kind of unique.
Well, I'm bringing up a picture here that we've pulled. Today's Throwback Thursday, right? So I'm pulling up a Throwback Thursday pic from a few years ago, which looks like you in action at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So if you don't mind, why don't we use this photo as a jumping off point to tell us about service there, about the tomb, about what goes into that?
Yeah. So I had a friend of mine who was in my unit at Echo Company, Case Wilson, who was a former tomb guard and had cycled back out of the tomb and back into the regular unit. And he kept encouraging me, Benton, you really should go down and try out to be a tomb guard, because so you're what they call a 3-time volunteer. You volunteer to go in the military, and then you volunteer to go to the Coast Guard, and then you volunteer again to go try out for the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And I wasn't quite so sure, Parker, that it's what I wanted to do. I heard these horror stories of how difficult the training is, what they put you through.
Right.
I don't want to use the word hazing, but I suppose I'm going to. It's just such an elite platoon of guys. Make sure you've got what it takes, and they're going to put you through a lot to make sure that you've got what it takes to be a tomb guard. And so I heard these horror stories. I wasn't so sure. So I went and on one of my days off, I went from the time the cemetery opened until the time the cemetery closed, and I watched those tomb guards walk back and forth and do the change in the guard. And I said, I really want to do this. And so that next Monday, I went and knocked on my commander's door, and I said, hey, I really want to go try out for the tomb. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah. I'm sure.
That's so cool. And is this you here too on the left there?
That's me on the left. Me and Jeff Bennick and a guy named William Johnson. The one in the middle is from Ohio, which I'll tell you a story about in a few. And then the one on the right, William Johnson's from Dothan, Alabama. Okay. And so, it was a unique training experience. When I first volunteered down there, it was exactly what I heard. And people always ask.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned the word hazing, and it has such a negative connotation. And hazing, of course, is totally unacceptable in some places, right? I mean, I was in a fraternity; they hazed you. There's no room for that, and sadly, folks get in a lot of trouble with that. But at the same time, with what you're talking about, it is so important that we properly vet who gets to serve in this institution, right? Because you want zero margin for error, that the person who's doing what you're doing right here in this photo with these two men that you mentioned is up for the challenge, right? I mean, that's something we just can't screw up as Americans, right? So, on one hand, you hate to hear about how tough it is, but at the same time, don't we kind of need it to be as strict as possible and to weed out anybody that can't take it, isn't up to it, doesn't respect it, etc. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I guess that line between improper hazing and the most adequate, preparation that this institution deserves, it's got to be a thin line, right?
It is a thin line, Parker, but you're exactly right. This duty station, this guard post is of such high importance that you risk it being in the wrong hands, the wrong guard being up there and falling down or passing out or giving up when the conditions get bad. When as Americans, we always think of the ultimate sacrifice as dying for your country, right? But truly, if you think about what the ultimate sacrifice is not only giving up your life, but also your identity. At that point, what more do you have to give?
Great point.
And
Yeah.
there's a
And
quote.
we can't take chances with that. I mean, we can't let political correctness get in the way of
100%.
honoring those men and women that make that sacrifice.
You're exactly right. And a big thing that always pushed me, and some tomb guards use this as a quote to kind of explain why we do what we do. But this quote is actually on the World War II memorial. So if you ever go to DC, look for this quote on the World War II memorial. But it was Admiral Chester Nimitz at the close of World War II. He said, "They fought together as brothers in arms. They died together, and now they sleep side by side. To them, we have a solemn obligation." And that
Wow.
has always stuck out to me.
That's powerful stuff. Yeah. Wow.
It's so powerful, Parker. I'll show you. This flag right here actually flew on Audie Murphy's grave. Who? Not sure if you're familiar with the name Audie Murphy. He was an American.
Tell our viewers about that.
He was an American actor. Well, he went on to be an actor, but he was a Medal of Honor recipient, one of the most famous Medal of Honor recipients from any American. But Audie Murphy was a true American hero. And so every year, Arlington Cemetery, all of the military units around there do what they call a flags in ceremony, which this flag is thick because I've made it out of tape. But, just your typical handheld American flag, we put one on every headstone in the entire cemetery. Well, when we do flags out and we take them out, as tomb guards, you go pick a particular flag, and we take masking tape and we build it up and make it thick like this. And then what we do is we turn it into a ledger. And they're sort of messy.
That is so cool.
This ledger has every time I've ever walked at the tomb, every time I've done reflaying ceremonies, changing up the guards. And that quote is so special to me. I'm not sure if you can see it, but
no, man, you got it right there. Yeah, right there in the corner.
Admiral Chester.
Wow.
And that's one of the best ways to explain kind of why we do what we do as tomb guards and why we have a standard of perfection is because they deserve. That's what the unknowns deserve, and nothing less.
Yeah. Wow, what a great legacy you have there in that flag and that log. I mean, that's just something I'm sure your family's going to want to pass down for generations. That's so cool, man.
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
Jason.
Well, what are some takeaways from serving there? I mean, what are some lessons you learned along the way? I mean, you shared that profound quote. I'm sure it had to be really tough to leave that career behind and move on to the next thing. But before we get into talking about the next thing, what are some of the biggest lessons you learned in the military and particularly in serving in that unit?
Yeah, I'll tell you two of my favorite stories real quick. Is one is Honor Flight Organization is an organization that flies World War II veterans to DC for free. It is an amazing organization. Louisiana, at one point, we had flown more honor flights than any other state in the U.S. And so, World War II veterans are our greatest generation, really.
Of course.
We built the World War II memorial for them, but they never got to see it. And so many of them just didn't have the opportunity. So this organization would fly them up. And we were always familiar when an honor flight would come up to the tomb as we were walking out there, because we're wearing sunglasses. So believe it or not, we're looking around, we're watching.
Right.
And you see them, in their World War II hats, and most of them are in wheelchairs. And I had just finished my hour-long shift, and I was walking off, had my M14 rifle in my hand. And as I'm leaving the rails and chains to go off the plaza, they had lined the sidewalk up with World War II veterans, and they're all in wheelchairs. And as I'm walking in between them, I see the first guy, and with all his might, he's pushing himself up out of his wheelchair. And he just behind him tries to help him, and he swats him away. He gets it. He stood up to salute me as I passed.
Oh, my God. Wow.
Other guys did it as well.
My
eyes welled up, tears flowing down my face.
Of course.
I broke protocol, saluted them back. Just one of the most memorable experiences of my life. It really made me realize how much of a common bond that all veterans from any generation have. And it was a great lesson for me, no matter if you're a World War II veteran, Vietnam veteran, a veteran anytime, it doesn't matter. You have a common bond and respect for one another, because I kept thinking to myself, man, who am I to deserve these guys, the greatest generation, standing up and saluting me. And so it always stuck with me as just this common bond among veterans.
Yeah, I mean, that had to be an almost out of body experience. I can't imagine, what that was like. And I'm so impacted hearing the reverence you have for these men that served. We were fortunate enough on this show a few weeks ago to get Mr. Reggie Peavy on, who served in World War II. There's so few of those guys left. And he talked about some of the greatest men to ever walk the streets of Ponchatoula. Folks like his neighbor, Hollis Poche, my best friend. Will Richardson, Will's grandfather, who won the Bronze Star and 2 Purple Hearts. Wow. And, Wink Vineyard, who basically adopted us Layrisson boys as his quote unquote grandkids, who served in the Navy, not only in the Atlantic, but when his boat was shot down by German U-boats, they shipped him back over to the Pacific, and he finished up the war over there. And just so many great soldiers and sailors and airmen or whatever. Like they just, there's just never, you hit the nail on the head. It's the greatest generation, and always will be. And wow, how powerful that is. Anita Timms, who's this? Is this your mom?
That's my mom.
Yeah, Miss Anita, thank you for watching. Thank you for producing such an amazing boy. I can see why you love this story. It gives any of us chills. Mr. Paul, go ahead. I'm sorry, Benton, please.
She's come to a lot of my speeches because I get on for Kiwanis Rotary clubs from different areas,
right?
Sort of things. She's heard this story probably 100 times, but
still gets chills.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Well, for good reason. Miss Anita, we really appreciate you watching. Mr. Paul Kluka, you're still here, and he thanks you, Benton, for sharing this story. It's such powerful stuff. And I got to say, I feel so bad that today is the day that we have to cut our interview a little short, because we have not had such a powerful topic, here on the Ponchatoula Live show yet. So I'm going to ask you to commit to maybe making the time to come back and see us again, because we're going to want to hear the rest of your story, right? I mean, we've only kind of scratched the surface. But I think, what better topic could we have than these amazing veterans and your service? And, like you said, the sacrifice, not just to give your life for the country, but to give your life and your identity. It's just so important that America continue to honor that. And so I'm going to put this picture right back up here again. And, we can all see you in action there. That's just powerful stuff, man. It's, I couldn't get tired of this ever.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this. Before we break, I'd like to kind of talk just very briefly, and this is the conversation we'll continue next time, but let's talk very briefly about what you're up to now.
Yeah.
Because what you do now is very different than the story you've been telling.
Yeah.
But it's important too. And I see it every day. My job, I'm an injury lawyer. So I deal with folks when they're having some of their worst days of their life. They're injured in a car wreck, typically, right? Sometimes they've lost a loved one. Sometimes it's the worst thing imaginable. It's death and wrongful death. And when that happens, they need insurance there to protect them, to help them. And so you're selling not only the car auto policies that I deal with and other, adjacent insurances, but homeowners. I mean, you've been selected to be a State Farm agent. That's a really elite, calling. It's a great company. State Farm is the company I use to insure my own family, to protect us. Tell us about that. What's it like for you to work in insurance, and just give us a little bit, maybe a preview for the next interview about why you accepted this calling in your more recent chapter of life, and kind of what it means to you and how you go about your business.
Certainly. My journey here actually stemmed from me being a tomb guard. I met this guy on an honor flight, and so he had a friend who was a State Farm recruiter, and that's how I kind of got involved. I'll tell you, State Farm has been so good. It's like a family, and you've got guys like Philip Bankston, who you had on your show recently.
Yeah, great guy, one of the best.
That's it. Mr. John Molaire, Miss Patty Hubert, that's here in Ponchatoula.
Wonderful folks, yeah.
They are, and it's just a special type of person that gets involved with State Farm, and they treat you like family. I was really nervous to open up here in Ponchatoula, open a State Farm agency. There was already 2. Then you got Philip, who his office is in Covington, but he's a Ponchatoula boy. Mr.
Right, yeah. Right? He spends more time at the firehouse than his insurance office. Yeah. Just kidding, Philip. I don't. Nobody's keeping track, but no, you're right. He's basically, or was kind of, the 3rd local agent, even though he's technically out of town. That's a good point.
Exactly. And so it's really been like family, and to take care of people's needs when they're having a hard time, when they're going through a lot. You
Right.
need your insurance company. You need somebody that can stand behind you. And look, insurance companies are not perfect. But the most important thing that I can tell you is it doesn't matter who it is, myself, Philip, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you know that those people have your back when something goes down, and that they can
Right.
count on you to call them, that they can call you and rely on you to go to bat for them and
For
try to
sure.
figure out the best way possible to recover from whatever disaster or heartbreak that they're going through. Because
That's a great point, because there's a big character component there of the people purchasing insurance have to trust you on the front end to be there when they need it most, right? But we also need somebody who's bright. I mean, you talked earlier about how well you scored on the ACT, the ASVAB, all that. Philip, we talked about when he came on the show. He's Mr. 30 ACT, whiz kid student. But I bring that up for this reason. It's not enough to just be a great guy or gal as an insurance agent. You got to be smart too, because you have to kind of be able to predict to some extent before disaster strikes what kind of coverage folks may need. And none of us have a crystal ball. My parents didn't know that their farm cabin was going to burn down a decade or more ago. But their agent needed to let them know, oh, you're buying a second home, you need to have it covered for fire in case disaster striked. And because they did, State Farm was there when that happened. And, I tell folks all the time, you need to have uninsured motorist coverage, because half the drivers on the road in Louisiana are poor with either no coverage or minimum coverage. You can't count on them to have what they need to pay your medical bills, et cetera. And so, folks like you need to be smart, honorable, and you check all the boxes. So do Philip and the other folks that you mentioned. Well, I appreciate you saying that. I'm so sorry that we're cutting a little bit short here today so we can get to baseball parks. But before we go, and again, I'm inviting you back. We will do round 2 to get you back on this show to tell your whole story. But before we go, what else would you like to share with our viewers? Anything that's on your heart or in your head, or just what would you love to share with us before we break?
Parker, like you said, a lot of what tomb guards represent and what they do, there's a lot of rumors, a lot of myths about them. One thing that I would encourage people are always interested, always have questions about that. I would encourage our viewers to go to tombguard.org. It will answer literally every question that you could possibly have. And I am so passionate about the education part of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, because I think it's such an important thing for Americans to understand and get behind, and what it represents, because it's so much bigger of a picture than just the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, if you really understand what it's about. And so I certainly encourage tombguard.org is our official society website. It will have every answer to any of your questions.
If I've spelled this right, it should be up on the board, tombguard.org.
That's it.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And Benton, thank you for being with us here today. It has been such a pleasure to interview you. You're such a great guy. Every time I see you, whether it be at Rotary or the Strawberry Festival or wherever, you're just always an uplifting presence, man. So, folks, if you need insurance, give Benton a call. If you got questions about the tomb, I can't speak for him, but I feel confident he would be happy to take your call anytime. If you didn't watch this live and you're watching this tomorrow or in a week, hit him up, give him a call, shoot him a message here on Facebook, whatever. But he's just a giver at heart. And you can tell it in his history, his long history of service to our country, to our community. He's a great guy. So Benton, we're going to get you back on. Thank you for coming on. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in. I'm sorry that we needed to start a little early today and end a little early today. We will be back here next week with Suzette Calli and our daughter, Callie Hines, to talk about Stowaway Coffee Shop and Pappy's Stowaway Cafe, their restaurant. So thanks to everybody for tuning in to Ponchatoula.com, and especially thank you to Benton for sharing your time. We'll see you next week.